curiosity. What are you so curious about? Everything, Mr. Curiosity.
All right, folks, Mr. Curiosity here, also known as Joe Snedeker with another Joe Calabro from the Circle Drive-In. But before we get to Joe, I got to tell you this, Joe, if you don't mind, because this is all about you.
Okay.
In your business. But I got to tell you how I got to you, because I didn't really plan on this, as you know.
Okay.
So, I was born in 66. So in the 70s, my parents would start taking me to drive-ins, like a lot of people.
Right.
And I think the last movie I saw at your place before I had kids was Charles Bronson, Death Wish, right? I mean, I was probably 8 years old, and that was the coolest thing in the world. And then, years pass. I started having kids in the 2000s and late 1990s, and I think I saw Nemo at your place when my kids were young. So that's still over 15 years ago. Sure. And I went to an occasional flea market. That's it.
Right.
So then I got a call 2 weeks ago from my buddies. We're going to go see Blue Oyster Cult at the Circle Drive. I'm like, okay, sounds like fun.
Right.
So we had a great experience. Unfortunately, the weather was horrible. It was in the 40s with drizzle.
Yes.
And like an idiot, like a typical guy, I didn't bring like a jacket or gloves or anything. And I wanted to go.
Why would you need to?
Why would you need to? So I go into the concession stand to warm up. I told them I had to go get something to eat, but the truth is I wanted to go warm up.
Right.
So I go in there, and it's human nature. All of these memories come flooding back, and you probably hear this a lot. Yes. Not too much has changed inside your Circle Theater concession stand. I felt like I was 8 again. I see the sign for hot dogs, French fries. I see the countertop, everything. I was filled with this vibe that I couldn't even explain. It was like time travel. Right. And I started talking. Before you know it, you pop out, and here we are. What do you think?
That, the best plans are no plans.
That's I know, right? I know. And I'm like, maybe he'll do a podcast. So why don't I ask? And you were great, and you were willing. And the best part is I found out that your mom was my superintendent at my high school in the 70s.
Yes. It's a small world, and it keeps cycling back around. Right, Joe?
The story gets weirder. So your name is Joe Calabro. And may I ask you, let's start at the beginning. The Circle Drive-In. Where are you from? Where is the owner from? Who isn't you, but is related to you? Let's hear it.
First, I just want to thank you for the time today. It's these are fun.
Well, they are.
You have such a great reputation in the area, and it was fun because, full disclosure, when we were standing there, you probably had 10 fans come up to you. They may have had a couple of too many beers, but they were nonetheless fans who were just so happy that you were there. So it was very fun to see your fan group who saw you out of context, and that was enjoyable, I have to say.
Yeah, and then there's like honor amongst thieves. Whenever you go somewhere together, like a rock concert, it's like, whoa, he's into this too.
That's right.
Let's high five. Let's not tell anyone. I love it.
Exactly, thinking it's going to be a secret.
Yeah,
but,
right.
So the history of the place is a little different from my history with the place. But let me start with, if you want mine first, or actually the theater.
Well, yeah, I'm curious to hear. The only research on that, I go into these things with no plan, and that's the way I like it. So I find out that in the 1930s, drive-ins start popping up all over the country, and then they peak in the 50s and 60s, with maybe 3,000 of them across the United States.
Right.
And now there's just a few hundred left, and yours is one of them. But you told me, all I know is there's some 90-some-year-old uncle of yours who passed away, and he started this whole thing, right?
Yes. So the drive-in, the Circle, started in 1949, and it was one of the early ones in the country when they were at their peaks in the 50s and early 60s. There were, I think, about 3,000.
Yeah.
And now there's a little over 300. My uncle and aunt, Mike and Gwen Delfino, had a drive-in that they started in 53 in Honesdale called the Maple Drive-In. And
I've been to that one too, and I haven't heard about that since then. This is weird.
Okay. Well, they built that and ran it. And then in 63,
Now, may I ask your uncle, the Delfinos? Is that
Yes.
what you said? Delfinos?
Yes.
Where were they born?
Mike was born on the west side of Carbondale, and Gwen, who was my father's sister, was born on Belmont Street in Carbondale.
So these are my people, and I was born a quarter of a mile up from Belmont Street. It's in my blood.
Yep.
So this is weird.
Right there.
Well, what made them want to start a drive-in theater in Honesdale? How does that happen?
Well, my uncle at the time was working on the train as a dispatcher.
All right.
And he decided that was not going to be the only career that he had. And my aunt was a teacher in the Carbondale School District. But my grandfather, her father, had been a businessman in Carbondale since the 20s. He had the old Liberty Hotel. He had an import grocery store. He had the gas station on the corner there on River Street and Salem Avenue.
Okay.
He started the Liberty Theater, which was a silent theater up where Pinky's Restaurant used to be over down on the corner by the nursing home.
I don't recall that.
Yeah, that was before your time and before my time. He was instrumental with starting the Mount Carmel Church. So he was a true immigrant story who came here at age 10, never saw his parents or his family again, and somehow got from Ellis Island to Carbondale. And started
Cole?
all.
I'm sure Cole brought him here, right? Like everybody else.
Actually, it wasn't. Interestingly enough, he came here because I think he thought there was opportunity, but he never worked in the mines.
Okay.
When he came here, he worked as a kind of a chambermaid type thing in a boarding house so that he could afford to live there. He was 10, 11, 12.
What's his country of origin?
He was from Italy. He was from Calabria, Italy. So he's Southern Italian.
See, I have this theory. I have this theory that because I have Slovakian and Polish roots.
Mm-hmm.
My theory is that, and this is only anecdotal, all of us Northern European guys, we were the back-breaking workers, and then you Mediterranean immigrants, like the Italians, are the ones that started the business. Why is that? Why did
I would love to go back.
It seems that way, doesn't it?
Talk about it. I'd love to go back 150 years and sit in a room with you and I and them.
Yeah.
To really understand what that thought was when they all came here. They had nothing. And they came here for the future. And they all decided different pathways to the future. When my grandfather came here, as the story goes, he was so impressed with coming to America and with the Statue of Liberty, then every single one of his businesses throughout his career was named Liberty.
Get out of here.
And the logo was the little Statue of Liberty torch on all of his businesses. To this day, my generation, I have a couple of things that are called Liberty. We have restaurants in DC that are called Liberty. So we've kept that lineage, because if you're 10 years old and don't speak the language and are left here with nobody, and you can make it, that's a strong connect for us, as you can imagine.
And Liberty Tax, nothing to do with you guys. They took the name too.
No, somebody else took it. I can't imagine.
So then he starts these businesses.
So my grandfather starts these businesses.
While my grandfather is working in the mines for a penny a day, probably getting
and he was coming to the bar afterwards.
Yeah, he was
having a beer with that. Yeah. So it was working off the mines, but really being the hospitality side of the mines. And my aunt, Gwen, worked with my grandfather for years. And then when she got married to Mike Delfino, they decided that they wanted to start a business. And I think it was really that Mike wanted to do something on his own because he was entrepreneurial.
Okay.
And while he was working night shifts on at the train as a dispatcher, he started the business. So he was working a full-time job as a dispatcher while he was starting his businesses, and did that for years until the businesses got successful enough that he retired early from being a dispatcher.
So one of the businesses he poked into was real estate up in Honesdale. Am I following your story? And then he started the drive-in?
Yep. Then he bought real estate up in Honesdale, and he decided that in the area, there was nothing like that. And it was on the fringe of the Poconos. Bought property and built the Maple Drive-In in 53, before I was around, before you were around.
And then during this entire time, my grandfather was still just going into the mines and nothing else.
Well, that was an important job in those days.
I know, you're right. Yeah. So then the
so-
Honesdale one, did that immediately work out?
It took them a couple years because it was new, very, very new. But,
Right.
in those days, I mean, by the time I was, I guess maybe 8 or 10, I worked there. And in the summertime, we would still have to go with the little posters to all the camps and put the poster with what movies were coming in over the next couple of weeks and all the summer camps that came in. That was the majority of the people who would come. It was a summer business at the time. And it took a few years before it got up and running, but it became successful enough that after 10 years, they decided to buy the Circle. I guess it must have come up for sale and they bought it.
I'm wondering this. I'm wondering two things. When you say I'm going to start a drive-in, is it literally a piece of land and you have to get the axe and chainsaw and cut everything down, flatten it, and buy a big projection screen, or build it and attach the panels and attach the electrical? Like, how does all that happen? How does one person just say I'm going to do it?
I was not there when that happened, but the story goes, it was a blank piece of land. And it was up on Route 6 in Indian Orchard, right across from the State Police Barracks. It's now the Ford dealership that's up there.
Okay.
And so they erected a metal screen and they cleared the land and they built a concession stand and they put the old speaker posts in, because that's, it was hardwired to put the speaker in your window in those days in the 50s. Yeah. And that was their business.
It just seems like, and maybe I'm not a go-getter, it just seems like if I had to do all that, I'd be like, oh, no, I'm just going to go to the mines and shovel some coal today. I mean, that's a lot to do.
It's a lot of risk, especially, neither one of them was in that business.
Right.
And they just decided that this was something that was cutting edge, that they would get out in front of it. And that became their love, is that business. And it was small and they could manage it. Yeah. But my uncle wasn't satisfied with just the one.
Of course not. Of course.
And although my aunt was not as risk-taking as my uncle was, he convinced her to buy the Circle in '63.
And here's what I'm wondering then, if this was the time of drive-in theaters, why wasn't the Circle hitting grand slams so that someone didn't want to sell it? You would think, and
it was an interesting question. I asked that question many times to him, and he said because there were multiple partners at the time and it wasn't anybody's main job. It was kind of an investment, and so it didn't have the passion to be able to grow it. I think.
I see. That's a sufficient answer. Do you know why it was called Circle?
Because on Route 6, a little bit south of there, was the Circle, because there used to be a circle, like a traffic circle.
Oh, really?
Before you went down to Scranton or up to Clark Summit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and again, it was built in '49. Now that highway was not much of a highway. There were a handful of businesses, and that was one of the only businesses on that highway at the time, from Carbondale all the way down to Scranton.
Is that
so
right?
You got a little further. Yeah, this was. There wasn't much of anything. I mean, you and I know it, that it was, already had the mall, already had the other things. That was way before any of that stuff existed.
Target, Walmart, the mall.
Nothing was there.
Nothing. It was just
nothing.
This. I wonder if that was coal land up there, because it's definitely.
It is.
Is it?
Up on the back part of the property, because the front part is about 30 acres. The back is another 50 acres. The back was all just mines and barren land.
So he buys this. Does he improve it? And how old is he? And what year is this?
63.
63.
So he was probably
like in his 30s, something like that?
Yeah, late 30s probably.
And there he is, this entrepreneur, this businessman, movie theaters, businesses,
right.
and immediately successful. Do you think the theater?
It became very successful, because at the time, drive-ins were still very cutting edge. People liked them. It was different. It was very family oriented.
Yeah.
He shied away from doing any of the, that period of time when there was a lot of the X-rated stuff. He wouldn't go there, and he kept it family friendly.
Like the Oak Hill, right? In Old Forge, they went there.
Yes, they went there. Yes, and they're not there anymore. So I guess that's probably a proof. So, it moved along over those years, and he decided, probably, I think it was 71 or 72, that he needed to expand it more. And he and my dad at the time, now my dad is also from Carbondale, and he used to run the Liberty Hotel. That was our family's, and so that's what he did. And he would work with him, and so he took a ride to upstate New York, and he said, I'm going to go take a look at this flea market. I heard about this when I was at a convention. So they drive up there, and there's a ton of people up there, and he said, I'm going to start one of those. And he would tell that to the day he died. He said, and your father told me that I was crazy. That would never go. But I said, well, we're going to try it.
So this is your dad or your uncle?
My dad told my uncle that my uncle was crazy. Because he didn't think it was going to work.
He didn't think it was going to work. So wait, to back up though, so flea markets weren't a big thing then?
Almost none.
Get out.
Almost none.
And there's another thing I just thought always existed, but no.
No, there were, there were some down south, some in the Midwest.
Right.
There was a couple here and there. There were none in anywhere near the central or northeastern part of Pennsylvania at all. People would have like garage sales, and they would have, church bazaar sales, but nothing that was an organized thing.
And this is a time when the theater, the drive-in, was flourishing. So there's no need to say, let's do a flea market. It's not like you needed more, but it was doing great.
It was doing great, but he was always
looking for more.
Always conscious to not settle on what was there, because as he would say, you never know when the next shoe is going to drop.
Wow.
And
flea market idea.
So it started the flea market. It started off very slow. I used to work there when I was a kid, because by this time now I'm early teen.
And this is 70s, 1970?
This is early 70s.
Early 70s.
And
flea markets now.
Yeah. So there were like, I think the first day there were 10 people there, maybe 15 people. And he kept building it up over the years. And now, if it's a sunny, nice summer Sunday,
all right,
we'll have, 200 to 300 vendors. We'll have thousands of people that'll be coming in and out during the day. And we continually, as you know, get high scores from everybody. People come from tri-state area to be vendors and to come and visit it, and the farm market part of it. We're this year, we're looking to curl it, because we had a lot of requests to do craft fairs. And so we're going to try some Saturdays now, not just Sundays, where specific craft fairs. There's even one that maybe it's not your genre, and it's a little out of my, but it's a punk rock flea market.
What makes you think I'm not a punk rock? Come on, The Clash, Good Charlotte, come on.
All right, well, I missed.
Sex Pistols, come on.
So there's a few Saturdays that we're actually going to do punk rock festival at night, and during the day a flea market. And there's like, I think 75 or 100 punk rock oriented vendors who are coming up to do their stuff on a particular Saturday. And then that evening is going to be some movies that are of their choice.
Oh my God. So that's got to be unique to have this carryover, this crossover. You're doing the flea market for a specific target audience, and then movies with that target audience.
Yeah. So you figure you have one thing with the movies.
Oh man.
Then the flea market's a different group, some crossover, but a different group. And that really was it for many years. Part of the issue with the movies is that in the beginning, the drive-in could never get first run movies.
Yes, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, and it took a long time and a lot of fights. And Mike, my uncle, was at the forefront of that fight with the industry to get drive-ins to get what they call day and date. So whenever it's released both at an indoor as well as a drive-in. And they finally won that battle.
So before you're in my time, was it always like that though? In the 60s, could you get first run?
That day and date didn't happen until probably late 70s or 80s.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So now you're put in this pigeonhole where you have older or second-rate movies, and that's nice.
Yep. And it started to dwindle because people wanted to see the new stuff. That was part of it too. He could see that happening. They won the fight as an industry, and they started to get first run. And on a nice summer night, if you've got two kids and you want to see a new Disney, just like you with Nemo,
Yeah.
what better place to go with your kids, and they love it. And
Right.
yeah. And so those two continued along pretty well over the years.
Well, I was trying to think though, if I can interrupt you for a second, the time frame. So 60s, 50s boom time. Here comes the 70s, and you can still show first release movies. But
Right.
now at the 70s, the small towns are dying, so the theaters are going away. But now
Right.
here comes the malls with their big theaters, correct?
Yeah.
So now it's kind of a little bit of probably the beginning of the end of the theater experience, because as the city theaters die,
Right.
mall theaters are taking off. So every town's got a mall or two, and they have a new theater, AMC,
Yep.
whatever it was
Yep.
at the time. And now people are doing that instead. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, clearly that started to happen. And then when you got the multiplex, 5,
Yes.
10, 15 screens, what would happen is that the indoors would get the first run. And then if it didn't do well, they'd move it to the little screens, because when you have to rent a movie, you have to commit to keep it on your screen for sometimes 4 to 6 weeks if it's a big blockbuster. Because
Okay.
the producers and the movie companies, film companies, want to have it so that it is, it's there, so they get a film rental. That's how that works. So whatever the gate is, there's a percentage of that the film company, you pay them to rent it for that period of time.
Then and now?
Continued, yeah.
See, I'm so nosy about that. So let's just say, let's do a for example, and you can cut me
Okay.
off anytime, because I'm curious, but you can
Sure.
say, Snedeker, shut up. All right, let's say a new movie comes out tomorrow. You
Right.
want this thing.
Right.
It's Rocky 8. I don't know what it is, but
Right.
let's say it's a big movie. Could you, it's a gamble still, right? You have to
Absolutely.
pay for what? The usage for a certain time period?
It's called a rental. You pay for a film rental. So,
But do you get to choose the dates? I mean, the times, like I want it for a week. I want it for a day. I want to show it 20 times.
a little bit. What happens is most exhibitors, which is somebody who has a movie theater like us, you're termed an exhibitor,
All right.
has a booker, and the booker is like a broker with the film
Oh,
company.
man.
And so they're negotiating to get them to your screens or to someplace else. And there's a fee that's a percentage fee that they negotiate. So let's say you
Percentage
get
of what
Rocky
you collect?
at the gate. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So let's say it's Rocky 8, right?
Yes.
And they think this is going to be a huge movie. They may charge us 70 or 80% of the gate to have that movie on our screen for that period of time. And so there's a negotiation, whether you have it for 1 week or 3 weeks, with the people who are the agents from the different, MGM or whoever is the
No
main-
initial fee. It's a percentage usually.
It's a percentage of the gate.
It's
Yeah.
always a percentage.
Yes.
You can't
It's
say
a
I'm gonna
different
buy-
percent.
You can't say I'm going to buy this for 10 grand and I'll have it for a month. Doesn't
No.
work that way. It's a percentage always. Oh, that's interesting.
It's always a percentage. But what happened is that when the hard tops, as they call them, the indoor theaters, had it, they would take a risk and they would think this is the Rocky 8, and let's say it's a dud.
Yeah.
And so if you only have one screen, you're stuck
Right.
maybe for a month, and you're essentially out of business for that month. So the whole concept of they'll move it to the smaller theaters within their theater.
Yeah.
And as long as they play it, even if there's only one person, they're fine because they committed for whatever that period of time is, and they're paying a percentage of whatever the gate is.
Oh, I
So
see.
part of, and at the drive-in, we only had the one big screen up until 15, I think. And at 15, Mike had wanted to do this 25 years ago, but then just never pulled the trigger to put a second screen up. And as he got older, he was 90 by then, I guess. And I was continuing to try to keep him energized and involved with the business. We said, we need to put a second screen up. So at least if we miss and Rocky 8 is a dud,
Yeah.
we can move it to the other screen. And so
Oh,
we built
man,
a second screen. And so now we have the 2 screens so that at least you have a little bit of a chance. Now, if you're AMC, you've got 10.
Yes.
So it's not the same. And there's a few drive-ins across the country who may have 3 or 4 screens, but very, very few. Most are still single screens and some are double screens.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's part of the,
what is there, a screen company call? I mean, they erect this big screen. That's got to be tens of thousands of dollars.
It's way more than that.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, because it's, it's all metal and you have the different surfaces on it and you have to get all the specs and, I mean, it's a big undertaking, and it's usually a steel company that's an erector company that brings it up with the cranes. And then you have somebody who is an expert in putting those up because of the reflections and the kind of finishes you need. So you can show the movie. So it has a good quality performance.
And being a meteorologist, I know that surface area that's exposed to the wind, it's like a sail. You have to have this thing so rigid because the force of the air against that thing, it just wants to topple down.
The anchors, the footers.
Oh my goodness.
When we built the new one, we were there for the whole process. The original one was there in 49 before we were there, but it was a big project. There's a lot of backhoes, a lot of heavy equipment, because you couldn't just pop it up and say, oh yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, there it
blows away. It was a very big undertaking to do that. And then, it's not just the screens, because if you remember in the old days, the quality on the screen was like, okay.
Well, I still see on the original 49 screen, you can still see the mosaic, the partitions.
You can still see the mosaic of the screen itself, but the actual projection part of it used to be film.
Okay.
And it was, truly a big reel of film.
Yeah.
And you would have a projectionist in the back, and there were 2 lamp houses. And so you would have one on, and you would have to look up in the corner for the little designation when it was time to flip it to the other one, and then you change it for the time of that movie.
Yeah.
I still have the original lamp houses in the garage from 1949. It has evolved over the years to be different kinds of film, different kinds of that, but then the industry started to go about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, to digital. And so the digital was an entirely different technology, obviously. So we had to buy entirely new lamp houses, all the computer backup for it, all the audio became that. And it was a big decision. And a lot of the drive-in theaters couldn't afford to do it because each screen was a couple $100,000 by the time you did the technology and all the other components of it. So I think that a big piece of that was driven by the film industry, because they came out and said, we're not going to give you hard film anymore. It's only going to be digital, because they didn't want to have the 2 medium that they had to produce.
Yeah, that's more costly for them.
Yep. So a ton of drive-ins closed, a ton of small regular theaters closed.
Yeah, there's another hurdle you have to climb to stay in the business.
Yep, big hurdle. And a lot of the people fell off the edge, both indoor and outdoor theaters. That's why a lot of the little single indoors couldn't afford the capital to be able to do that.
Oh, I see. Now,
and they closed their doors.
So these lamp houses that you're mentioning, the old school ones, is it like one bright light source?
One big bulb.
Could you describe that thing? And I bet, how long does it last and how much does that cost?
The bulbs themselves, I don't remember, but I know it was a significant amount for the upkeep, and they would last so many hours, and you would track how many hours. They would have like maybe 100 hours or something on a bulb. I don't remember exactly. That was a little before my time.
Well, maybe just 10, 20, 30 shows, and then you have to get a new bulb.
Yeah, and there was always, you had to have a projectionist who knew how to fix the machine, make sure the bulbs were there, because if the lamp house went out, you had no movie. You could have 500 people out there.
And then everyone's going,
exactly.
They're lining up for their money back. And I imagine that bulb is thousands and thousands of dollars, correct?
It was very expensive.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That,
a lot of moving parts that you never think about.
I know.
In behind the scenes in something like this. And so, when we transformed and we put the digital in, because he was convinced he did not want to go the way of the dinosaurs. So he invested a lot of money in changing to digital, invested a lot of money changing and putting the second screen up that was digital.
And that's 10 years.
So that was about 10 years ago.
And you can imagine the risk there, because you're thinking this is a dying industry.
Yep.
But you're holding on to, maybe it's not. There's nostalgia. There's heritage, and it did come back like he thought it probably would, right? You just hang on, and there's a market in a sense for it.
It absolutely. I think if it was a somebody who wasn't passionate of the industry and of what he did, you wouldn't have written that kind of check, because it was an enormous risk. But it was his life.
Uncle Mike
He,
loved that.
he loved it. He was there every day. He was there all day long. Every single thing he had his fingerprint on, and he absolutely loved the industry. He was a leader nationally in the industry because he'd been
Is
one of
that
the
right?
original guys, and was on all the boards and the various different advisory committees.
Now,
So
was
he
he
loved
doing
it.
other businesses, or is that mainly it?
No, once he retired from the railroad,
Yeah.
which was probably in the 60s sometime,
Right.
the two drive-ins were that was his business.
That's it.
Yeah, that was
I
his
love
business.
it. So that's his passion.
That was his passion. And then when he got older, the one in Honesdale, he thought it was too much of a hassle for him to run both. And so he sold that one, but he was never going to sell it. He was offered lots and lots of money by the
Is
big
that
box
right?
stores.
Yeah.
Before all the big box stores came down below the mall,
Yeah.
all of them wanted to develop up on that mountain.
I was going to say, so that piece of real estate where the circle is, that alone, millions, I imagine.
I don't know what the value is, but
Is
the
that
worth
prime
of it is
land?
certainly more than that. It's prime land. It's on the highway there. It's not developed in the back,
Right.
so that would be a big development. But people wanted to do that, and he would say, "There's no price. This is what I want to do."
Oh,
So,
I love it. Does
and
did your aunt, did his wife get involved, or mainly she just sat home and counted?
no, she was very involved. In fact, she ran the one in Honesdale when he ran the one at the Circle. And so they would leave in the evening at 5:30. She would go to Honesdale. He would drive down to Dickson City. And they did that for probably 40 years until ultimately they sold, when they were in their late 80s, they sold the Honesdale one.
So is it what, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Is that how it worked?
It used to be. Now it's pretty much every night we have something going on. The movies
but I'm talking about when he was doing it, that was his,
No, it was 7 days.
his job.
It was 7 days.
No.
In those days, it was 7 days a week.
And every day, that's it. He goes to his drive-in theater. He's projecting. He's opening up the concession stand. He's doing everything.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just nosy about this because I'm a jerk.
Sure.
Is this, and I don't know how you're going to tackle this, how you're going to say it eloquently. Is he a rich guy back? Does he make tons of money during this, or is it? I don't know. I'm just curious.
I wouldn't say that he made tons of money, but he always did pretty well.
He did pretty well.
And he did it for so many years. And he was not very extravagant.
No.
He had a very nice home that they had since the 70s. He had a nice car, but most of the rest of it, he just saved and invested. And that's why he was such a big benefactor to the community after that.
No villa in Italy, a second
he
home.
He really felt strongly about the community. He donated a lot to the Carbondale YMCA when they built the new wing. He donated a lot to Marywood College, which was my aunt's alma mater, for their outside amphitheater right before he died. He did lots and lots of things in the community because he was not a big spender. They went on vacation once in a while. They had a nice car. They had a nice house, but most of it he ultimately invested in.
You hear so many stories. I think I lost your iPad. We got to get Joe back. His iPad died. Is he coming back? He better come back. Come on, Joe. Come on back, baby. Are you coming back? All right, folks. No, this is uncomfortable. So I'm here hanging in the balance. I got a message from Zoom saying we lost connection, but we're going to get him back. It's going to happen any second now. I can feel it. And until then, I'm just going to tap dance and be like, boom, 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 boom. And he's gone. Whoa. Let me see what we can do here. And get Joe back. All right. All right, so we're going to get Joe back. He's dialing back in. And we're going to be finishing up with this great interview with Joe Calabro from the Circle Drive-In, because he's the man, he's the planner, and he's the big dude. And I know he's going to be back stronger than ever. There he is. All right. Any second, he's back.
Okay, I'm back. Somehow that one got lost, so I put you on my phone. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. No, I don't have video, but at least I can hear you.
Okay, let me see where the video is. Okay, how's that?
Perfect. It's just
Okay.
like it never ever happened. So we'll just edit that part out. Well,
Okay.
Joe, I'm so surprised that you hear so many stories about these older guys.
Yeah.
I'm talking about these first generations to America. They worked hard, they made a lot of money, and they still drove the same car for 30 years, and they lived humble lives, and they worked hard, and then they donated a lot of money and resources to help the community. I hope that's not gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was not. He was first generation born here,
Right.
and he fits in that model. The only exception to that, though, Joe, is that he. And I'm laughing because it's one of his the stories that people remember about him. He a few years ago he was awarded the Governor Casey Philanthropic Award, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And they do the little videos and they put the vignette up on the screen for all the people that are coming. And they asked him what his message to the younger people would be if they wanted to be successful.
Okay, this is good, man. I can't wait.
And he would always say, you know, I drive a Cadillac. And they say, yeah, and I get a Cadillac every 2 years.
Okay.
And he said, whether I need one or not, I get one every 2 years. And they said, and you know, the same color, same model.
Is that right?
I've had it so he had like 50 years worth or whatever it was. And he said, you want to drive a Cadillac like me? And the person would say, well, yeah, I'd love to drive a Cadillac. I said, well, it's pretty simple. What job do you have now? I said, well, I work at such and such a place. Said, what time do you work? I work from 7 to 3. Fine. So you go get another job from 4 to midnight, and that's how you buy the Cadillac. and that's what he did for years. He had a day job, and then he had a night job, and that's what he instilled in me. It's
and now it's a little bit of, I wish we can instill that. And not that I'm, the most outgoing, aggressive guy, but now it's, what could the government do for me? And how that has twisted. And I'm not putting in more than 8 hours a day. I worked 2 jobs my whole life. I still do, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah. No, it's that's how I was brought up. That's I in the family, I went to medical school. I practiced for years. I run a large physician group. I still do this as a labor of love, but all those years, it was the same thing. My kids will say, Dad, what are you going to work an extra for? I said, well, if I work an extra couple of night shifts, I can buy a different car. Or if I work a couple of night shifts, I can afford a mortgage. And that's how I grew up. That's how, I try to instill in my kids is that work ethic. But you're right. That's not the norm, Joe.
That's not the norm. And now we're sounding like a couple of old cranky guys, right?
I'm sure that my kids would agree with that comment.
Yeah, mine too. I've got one of them upstairs. So your uncle, Mike, who ran this through his 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, him and his wife, your aunt, never had children.
Correct.
So now they're older. Do they see a time where they say, now I have to pass the baton on, or how did that happen? I mean, how?
Well, my parents both died pretty young. They died in their early 50s. And I don't have any brothers and sisters. Mike and Gwen were always very close to a bunch of the nieces and nephews, but I essentially moved in with them when I was in college. And I always helped them. And I always really liked the industry. And so as they were getting older, their view was that, we want this to stay forever. We know you have the business acumen to do it, and we're going to ask you to keep this going. And so that became kind of that legacy for the businesses, because they didn't really want it to die.
So that day, did you think like this is a monkey on your back? Like, oh my goodness, entrusting this to me? Like, I don't have the time. I've got a life.
It was an onerous request, but I also took it willingly. Because at that point, they essentially took me in as their kid, And so there was a pay it forward, and then a reverse pay it forward. And so I've always been in that theory. And even when he died last year, I mean, he was 98. He died the last day of February. It was right before COVID.
Oh.
And we could have.
How about that?
And so, but, my thoughts were either we could shut it down, but I couldn't do that. I really couldn't do it. And we're happy to chat about that with you in the next part of this. But it was really a labor of love for him. And then for me, it was a big sense of responsibility to try best I could to continue what they did and then kind of switch it into what we're trying to do now.
And that was so just 2 years ago, if you want to go back, or 3 years ago, was it mainly still Uncle Mike and his wife running everything?
Well, we have a manager, Dave Castelli, who's been with my uncle for a number of years.
All right.
And so he was the day-to-day operations guy. I was behind the scene helping to steer it, but Mike was still there every single day.
Is that right? Isn't that something?
Because that was his love. That was his love up until 2 months before he died. He was there every day.
Get out. Boy, that's great.
Yeah.
So the sign on Route 6, is that all original, where it's the temperature
Yes.
That's all original?
Well, time and temperature is not original. That's been there a long time. But the
But that
marquee
structure.
itself, the structure has been there since 1949.
Get out. And then the entrance when you pull in and the guys are getting your tickets and all that, that's fairly 40s, 50s. That's right.
That's all stuff from late 40s, 50s, and we've tried really hard to keep the authentic stuff, but inside, put digital this and put upgraded that, but try not to change the facade. And the same thing in the concession stand, to try to keep it looking authentic, but the technology and what we're doing is, hopefully current. You look at the old place, but we still have a point of sale system on the register. So we're trying not to change the look and the feel, but we're trying to make it so that it's functional.
So I think you guys realize this isn't a great earth-breaking thought for me, that part of the charm is the nostalgia. So you almost don't want to change too much because that may turn people away. I don't know.
No, it's very, very much so. We spend a lot of time and energy. In fact, it's a lot harder to not upgrade.
That's right.
But to keep it looking original, but still to make it functional, like we did with the digital stuff. Well, if you didn't know that technology, you wouldn't think anything changed. But you walk back, and it's the same digital technology that's in, any high-grade AMC theater or Lowe's or anything. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But outside, you wouldn't think that. And the only thing that maybe you might think a little different is that in yesteryear, when we were kids, there was the speaker on the pole with the wire.
Yes.
Well, when we changed to digital, then those went away, and now it's all digital through your radio.
Right.
And you dial into that. So other than that, you wouldn't know, other than you would say, wow, that's a really clear picture.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't know that it was a whole different, it's kind of like an Intel inside. You can have the same box, but the inside of it was completely upgraded.
Don't hate me because I'm not sure the background for this. I have one of your speakers, and I'm sure you guys would count on losing 5 a year, 20 a year. I don't know. People would just drive away with them, take them. It's a cool thing. I honestly don't remember how I got it, but I have one of your original speakers. You lose a lot.
You should have had it on the shelf there.
Put it on the shelf back there. Was there a lot of that? Was that like built into the equation that you're going to have to buy
Absolutely.
20 new ones every year or something?
Every year we probably need close to 50.
Is that right?
Yeah, because some people would just forget and drive away and rip it out of the window.
Okay.
And other people thought it was a cool memento. So every year we got to redo it.
And everyone is wired to the hub through the ground, I imagine.
It was all hardwired through, because there was no such thing as Bluetooth.
I know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you get a lot of people, or don't you even know this because maybe you weren't there at the time, that would try? Did you have any good stories of people sneaking in? They're under blankets, they're in the car in the back. And then what do? You call them out? You can't call the cops. What do you do?
Well, there's a lot of those stories. And when I worked at them, I would work in the ticket office, or I would work in, it would be pretty easy when you would see somebody drive in who was a 17-year-old guy.
Yeah.
Nobody else in, and it was for a movie that he's not watching by himself. And the back of the car, the trunk would be scraping the bottom. And so So you'd call up to the top, and we always have had a security guy on site.
Right.
And they would go over to the car and just kind of wait there. And then sooner or later you hear boom, boom, boom on the back of the trunk because they're trying to get out, and the trunk opens up. And so sometimes they would.
Oh, that's funny. So you let them complete the crime.
Yeah. So we would let them complete, and then you chase them off. And inevitably somebody in there's parent was somebody who one of the staff knew. And so then the parent would get the call. And so that was far worse than calling the cops, as you can imagine.
And I had to relive that now when I went to see Blue Oyster Cult last week. And again, I'm giving you some scoop for the gossip around the neighborhood. Oh yeah, they're not letting you bring any booze in. They want you to buy all their overpriced booze there. That's why they're doing that. So that was a little bit of a negative I heard, but I can see your strategy there too.
Well, part of it was that, but part of it is also if people came in and they drank too much and then they left and they were driving, it does put some kind of an onus on us to not.
See that?
So it's a little bit of liability, but it's also having to do with wanting to control it a little bit.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And the concert thing just started. Is this the last year maybe?
Well, that was a COVID creation.
Get out of here.
Because we, as I said, he died the last day of February. 10 days later, 2 weeks later, the world shuts down.
Yeah.
And we couldn't open up for a couple months at all. And then finally, we started opening up for graduations because I saw in the papers that all these high schools, the kids couldn't graduate. And as you said earlier, with my mom being a superintendent, I'm very aware of the school situation.
Right.
And so we called a bunch of the schools and said, hey, you want to come and do the graduation? We'll be happy to, let you use the property. You can put it up on the screen. And, we're happy to do that as a community service. And it just so happens, and I'm sure it wasn't coincidental, but, I like to believe that it probably was. The very first school that said yes was Carbondale area, which happened to be where my mom was the superintendent.
Full circle, baby, full circle.
And so I get a call from Marty Lawler, who was the superintendent retired at that point, who was a junior teacher when my mom was the superintendent.
And was my boss, by the way, for a while.
And
my principal.
Okay. And he called me up and we had a really nice conversation. I hadn't talked to him in 25 years.
Yeah.
He said, I'd like you to give remarks if you're willing to. And so at the graduation, in front of the screen on the stage, looking out at 500 cars, because nobody could be out of their cars. This was still very early COVID. I gave a welcome and kind of a little bit of a keynote speech to the graduates. And
oh, really? That's excellent.
And I have to say, I've done a lot of speaking in lots of different places. And so I have, like you, I have some remarks set up and the usual introductory part of, who's there. And so I get in front of it and I look out and floodlights in your face and all I see are cars. And I couldn't see any faces. I couldn't see it. All I just see is 500 cars. And so I went off script and said, I've done this lots of places, but I don't know if you're going to think I'm funny. I don't know if you're going to think I'm insightful. I have no clue because I can't see you. So I'm going to have to wing this. And so I don't know how to get a response. And so all of a sudden in the far corner, one car started tooting their horns. And that became either the flashing of lights or the tooting of horn became the response to me as a speaker. And I will never forget that of all the speeches that I've ever given.
And that just organically happened, right?
It just happened.
So that's the physical equivalent of clapping.
Yeah.
Or going, I mean, it's just, wow, that's something, isn't it?
And at the time, because we were doing the graduations, we got a lot of interest from national press. And there was a photojournalist, Michelle Agins from the New York Times, who reached out to us. She was from the city, but was embedded up in the Poconos when they pushed a lot of the people out because they didn't want them in the city because it was so high risk.
Okay.
She reached out. We met. We had a couple conversations. She said, I'd like to do some photos. I'm intrigued with this graduation idea. So she came up and she did a full shoot of everything that was going on during the event, after the event, And we actually became friends, and she did a whole bunch of shoots over the summer. And it was picked up as a national release for the New York Labor Day weekend, full page, full with all the pictures. And we were a main source of pandemic innovation across the country. So it was very cool.
Now, being that there's a couple hundred other outdoor theaters, do you know if others did that before you, or it's like the first?
I don't know if we were the first, but we were one of the first, if not the first.
Get out of here. That's pretty cool. Crisis equals opportunity, right? Crisis equals opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then at the same time, we said, okay, well, that's nice, but how are we going to stay in business?
Yeah.
And there was a distributor who reached out to us and said, we're going to do some live stream concerts on the screen. And the initial one was Garth Brooks.
I heard about that. Big success, right?
And so they were doing that somewhere. And then we decided to do it on the screen. It was a big success. Lots of people came. Everybody was in their cars. Everybody was socially distant.
Yeah.
And we sat there and said, geez, we have all the streaming technology here to be sending, not just receiving. And so we then, after that, started to do the reverse. And so we started to have a lot of local concerts, and then we would stream them on Facebook. And so we became the source as opposed to just the recipient. And then the next step was somebody called us and said, gee, are you willing to do some concerts there? One thing leads to the other. And we did about a dozen concerts last year live. And it was a big success. Everybody felt very comfortable. It's the only place they could go and actually be out of the house.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had some naysayers from the town who didn't like the idea that there was sound that was kind of traveling down into Dickson City, and that was a big dissatisfier for us because we had to hire attorneys and engineers and sound engineers.
Static. Oh man.
We're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to bring some business to the area, and it ended up being unfortunate, and it hasn't gone away. I mean, they're still bugging us. We have to have the sound meters to make sure it's not a certain decibel level, and they forced us to turn. We had the screen up, or the stage up next to the screen up on the mountain, so we had to take it and redo it so that it's where you saw it down on the bottom.
Sound is going up. Did that solve the problem of sound?
It seems like it solved the problem because now it's getting absorbed in the woods.
Yeah.
They're traveling down. But
well, that was another investment you had to make then, a stage, the equipment, all that, right?
Huge investment. And we had to do it twice because the first time we did it, they yelled and screamed. And so we had to pay another price to redo it.
But it seems to me such an obvious outlet for concerts in the future. You park, it's ample parking. Where are you going to find a bigger parking lot than in a movie theater, drive-in? And then you simply walk out of your car and there's the stage. I mean, it's the perfect situation. This should be happening at all drive-ins.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are trying to do it, but if you didn't have the technology, then you probably couldn't do a simulcast with having it on the screen because you have to film it. It's not like a movie that's if we didn't have all the digital stuff in the beginning, we wouldn't have been able to do any of this stuff. And a lot of them
forget about that. I'm saying live concert stuff.
Oh yeah, well, clearly now
it seems a natural outlet for that.
We're committed to do it. We're doing it. There are places across the country that are doing it, but it's not for the lighthearted. I mean, it's a big investment. You've got to buy the band up front. You have to have the productions team. You have to have the sound engineers. You have to have all the roadies. It's another big gamble per night. It's a big gamble. But so far, I mean, the first one out, we had the bad weather, unfortunately, with Blue Oyster Cult, but we're hoping that continues. And I'm committed to continue that for the long run because it yet changes the venue instead of just being just movies. And then instead of being just the flea market, now it's moved to the next step of being the concert venue. Yeah. And, we're trying to round out. And a couple of years before this all happened, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we also started the Halloween attraction, the Haunt.
And there's a whole different group of individuals. There are Halloween freaks out there. That
whole different group. And so what happened with that was the same thing. My uncle was getting older.
Yeah.
And he was starting to get, a little slower. Excuse me, a little slower. And I read about this. It was in the Times or something one day. And so we said, gee, here's this other business that you use as a shoulder business, because that was September, October, when the peak of the drive-in was starting to peter out.
Yes.
So I went to a bunch of places across the country, and we got some ideas and hired a consultant, and we spent a few $100,000 developing that part in the back, and we put all the hay rides and the different facades, and we had to hire a bunch of actors, and so now it's really more of an entertainment complex instead of just being a movie. And that's what we're trying to make it. We're trying to have it so that it's all year round, at least up until right now. We can go up to about the 1st of December until it snows, and then we open up the 1st of March.
Well, I was going to say, how dare you not exploit the most exploited time of the year? You got to be able to do something for Christmas there. Come on, let's put our heads together. You got something coming?
We're thinking about doing one of those drive-through. If you've ever been down to like the
Tunkhannock one, Jersey,
and those. So we're actually talking to a few people now to try to put up something with a drive-through Christmas type thing. We haven't quite pushed the button yet, but we're researching that now.
I got a better idea. A week before Christmas, right?
Right.
It's called the Santa Claus Comes to the Circle Drive-In. And there he is on the big screen talking to all those children pulled up in their cars. And he's whispering to everybody in some grand way. It's Christmas with Santa. And then you have fake snow fall down. And then you're selling candles over there to the wives. And over there, they've got some other stuff for the fathers, maybe a beer garden type setup. I mean, come on, you got to take advantage of this.
I think that's a great idea. We're inching through them. That's the only gap.
That's the only gap.
Between. Part of it, we're looking to try to put some kind of a structure over so that the flea market can be partially indoor as well as outdoor. So
they are in many spots, right?
Yeah, so we're inching piece by piece to do that. But I love that idea with Santa on the screen.
You watch the ball drop for New Year's Eve right there. New York City is in front of you. Go on.
I think that's a great idea. We've done some football games too. We've been able to bring some, Penn State games and big games on the screen, so people have tailgated. They don't want to drive to Penn State. We've done 2 or 3 a year. We work with the alumni.
Another great idea. Yeah. Oh, man, I love it. Well, does this mean, I'm getting nosy again, that you gave up your, are you a physician? I don't know you.
I am. I'm an emergency doc. And
did you give that?
I don't practice clinically, but I'm the senior guy. I run a large group. We've got about 300 physicians in about 10 states now. And
so you're a busy guy.
So I tend to be a little busy. So I run the group, and now this is kind of that, passion type thing as this legacy, for my uncle and my aunt.
Well, I look at it this way: if you live as long and healthy as your uncle, you got 40 years of the theater business now awaiting. Come on, that's a whole life right there.
I've got 2 more careers left in me if I live as long as he does.
I think so. Well, this was great. I think we could wrap it up by you giving a little promo. So tell us a little bit about what's happening. So you got coming up in the next few days? Every weekend, it's the flea market.
Every weekend on Sundays, the flea market. We've got movies that are playing every weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, depending on what's going on. We've got a few more that fit in. We've got Eagle Mania that's coming. We have
that one. I'm interested. I'm going to be there. And now I know the big shot, so you're going to get me in free.
Absolutely. We've got Get the Let Out. That's a week from Saturday. That's the Led Zeppelin tribute band.
Gotcha.
We've got Steve Earl, who's a country singer. He's coming.
Steve Earl is amazing.
Yeah, so he's going to be there live. We're playing a bunch of retro things with the Lackawanna Historical Society. We're doing Caddyshack. We're doing Jaws. We're doing
all the older movies, like a classic night.
Yeah, classic night. Jurassic Park is coming up this week.
That's excellent.
In the later part of the summer, there's what's called Pop 2000 Festival, and Lance Bass, if you remember him from NSYNC, they will be there live, and so they're bringing a whole bunch of people from.
I won't be at that.
Of the only two. So we're hosting this year for the first time the Scranton Taco Festival.
Get out of here.
And we'll have the Bourbon Barbecue Festival.
Too much.
Yeah. And
there's too much.
so we're rolling those things through. Then we've got this is the classic piece. We were contacted from the Office people, and so we're going to host the Office convention over Columbus Day weekend.
Get out of here and just and play some of the series on the screen.
We're going to play the series. There's going to be some of the actors. Some of the actors are going to be there signing autographs.
Get out of here.
We're working with the Scranton Chamber of Commerce. They're going to do a couple of bus tours to go to the various different sites in the Electric City. So that's in October over Columbus Day weekend. And so we've got a bunch of these kind of little festivals. We've got some of the retro movies. We've got all the regular movies. And but these are pinpointed with these festivals. So more and more, we're trying to pull things in the day, not just at night. And then when we get to the fall, we also have because we have the Haunt, we're going to have the Spooky Film Festival.
Okay.
And that's a competition with a lot of the indies. And then going back to your original thought of, that first movie with Charles Bronson.
Yeah, Death Wish.
There's a guy now called Charles Bronzy. Charles Bronzy is a guy who's very popular in Japan, who looks just like Charles Bronson. And so he has a couple of horror kind of action movies. And so we're going to have a weekend showing his movies.
Charles Bronzy.
Bronzy, yes.
Did he choose that name to mock Bronson? That's not by accident.
He looks just like him. And his whole career is because he looks like him. With a little mustache, has the same look. And we've been contacted by a couple of producers. To do some first run. We played a couple Amazon first run or concurrent with the live streaming. So we're trying to reach multiple venues with the concerts, some of the festivals, and things that we never did before. But again, as we were saying, at the end of February last year, March, I thought we were going to be DOA. But thankfully, we flipped pretty quickly. And so we've changed the whole venue now.
I love it. Well, good luck with everything. And I know it's going to be a success. And now I can brag to all my friends that I know you, and I know the guy who's behind the Circle Drive-In. Excellent.
Absolutely. And you are welcome at any time to come up with your buds and just see your fan club is already there.
Yeah, that's right.
Come up to you anyway, right?
Or if you see me pulling in alone with a lowered trunk, you know what's going on there too. I'm trying to save a couple bucks. I got a couple kids in college. I got to do what I can.
Exactly.
All right, Joe Calabro, thank you so much for your time and the history of the Circle Theater. And Mr. Curiosity here, telling everyone spread the word and keep the good interviews coming like this one. If you have an idea, give me an email, joe.snedeker@wnep.com. But I appreciate your time. This was great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Take care.
I hope you had a good time. All right. Thanks, Joe. I'm going to hit the big red stop button.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Excellent.
Curiosity. What are you so curious about? Everything, Mr. Curiosity.